Okay, 4:31. Apologies for those of you who have been waiting 60 seconds, but maybe it created a little bit of drama. You never know. Welcome to Run Chat Live, episode 28. I still can't believe it when I say those sort of numbers. It's amazing. It only started last year, but we've been doing one a week now in preparation for the Run Chat Live running conference coming up in October in Brighton. We've seen quite a few of the speakers now. So the guest for today, I couldn't afford him. He was just too expensive. He's just too famous and well known to come over to England. No, not true at all. I only had a certain budget, but this man should definitely have been on the list. Maybe next year we'll try and bring him over from Denver, Colorado. It's none other than Jason Fitzgerald of strengthrunning.com. Those of you, hopefully therapists and runners who are into your running and understand the potential advantages, definitely advantages when it comes to performance of doing a strength training. Hopefully you've been to strengthrunning.com and you know it very well. So it'll be a pleasure to be able to speak to the man who created it. He'll be on in just a second. And ask him about, it's all very well saying get strong, but how do we get strong? How many reps, how many sets? Do we do it every day? What sort of exercises? What are the best exercises, and questions like that. So I'm hoping there'll be an awful lot of information in the next 50 minutes or so for runners. And we'll do that in a second. First of all, just a word from our sponsors, or not a word from them, a word on my behalf. Those of you who aren't aware, we are now sponsored by Brighton Beard Company. I wonder why. I don't know. So if you're looking at me at the moment, you're thinking, man, that beard's looking fine. Well, it's all thanks to Brighton Beard Company. Let's have a little flash of their website. Let's have a go. There we are. If you haven't been there already, if you don't have a beard, then this will seem a little bit kind of weird and unnecessary to you. But if you do have a beard and facial hair or moustache, then you'll know that you like your balms, you like your oils, you like your brushes, you like your soaps, you like your conditioners, your shampoos. It all kind of makes sense to you. So especially if you're local to Brighton, but if not, they do international and national, then check out Brighton Beard Company and look at all the wonderful, natural, organic, good for you products they have got there. And they're also sponsoring our conference on 30th, 31st. Hopefully we'll get them down there for a stand as well. So everyone coming in with a beard will smell great once the speakers take the stage. But anyway, for now, I'm going to bring up, let's just, on the conference, there's all details on the website. If you want to see speakers and the presentations, just go to runchatlive.com. It's all there. But I don't want to waste any more time. I'm going to bring up Jason Fitzgerald. Let's get rid of that. And let's say hello to Jason in 5 seconds or so. There we go. Good morning to you, isn't it, Jason?
Yes, good morning. How are you, Matt?
I'm really good. I'm all the better for seeing you looking so, can I say it, all so young and spriteful and full of energy, and I don't know what it is, something about the Denver air, is it? Or
well, thank you for saying that. The Denver air is a little thin. I'm surprised I don't look tired and devoid of oxygen.
No, not at all. You always look very, very well. So thank you very much for joining us. What is it about? What time is it your end?
It is 9:30 in the morning. So I'm sitting here with my coffee. I already told you I'm a little caffeinated and very excited to be here. Thanks for doing this later for you. This is almost dinner time on your end.
Oh, well, it depends what. In the north of England, we could say dinner because they say dinner for lunch. In the south of England, we don't say dinner. We say dinner for supper. Supper doesn't exist in the north. So it's you've opened up a whole can of worms there with terminology. Who knows what dinner is? I don't know. Us English, we get all weird when it comes to language. So it's 4:30 here. The kids are out. Sun's kind of shining. So it's fine. It's all happy days. So I did want you at the conference, by the way. It's just, what am I going to do? I feel guilty now having you here.
Well, it was a little bit of a tease, you talking about the conference right before I come on, only to hear how great it sounds and the great speakers and panels that you're going to have maybe next year. I hope
so, because one of the things that excites me as well, I mean, I've had the good fortune of meeting quite a few of the speakers, but people like who I know you're aware of, like Christopher Johnson, and then JF Asculia from Canada and Simon Bartow from Australia, they've never met each other in person. And yet they've kind of spoken or maybe been on opposite ends of a podcast, maybe for the last 10, 15 years. But the idea of actually having them all together in one room, and you can imagine, let's say you do come next year and you meet some people who you've probably conferred with for years and years, but you actually get to shake their hand in the real world and go, I recognize you. you're taller than I thought, or shorter than I thought, or whatever it's going to be. So yeah, I hope you can make it. It'd be great. I mean,
yeah, it'd be great, and yeah, I think everyone would be surprised to see that I'm the 5'7", 130-pound runner that everyone's kind of been imagining, and then I would be able to get to see your beard in person, which would make the trip across the pond entirely worth it.
Oh, that's just flattery. That'll get you everywhere. That's amazing. But then you have to be 5'7" and weigh next to nothing to be a good runner, don't you? That's what we're going to talk about today.
It's a little helpful. Sure. I kind of have the frame and size of a Dathan Ritzenhein, so I consider myself in good company.
Fantastic. Well, let's kick into it straight away then. I mean, obviously you have got the best sounding website name ever when it comes to strength training for runners, because you've got strengthrunning.com. And it's interesting reading a little bit about, I never realized that the reasons you set it up was because you were actually struggling with injury yourself. And it's almost like, wow, this worked for me. Let's look into it. Tell us a little bit about that for people who weren't aware.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started running about 21 years ago as a freshman in high school. And so I've been running for quite a long time, most of my adult life. And, I got into marathons like many of us do a little bit later in life after college, after I was, training for more track oriented distances. And I found that the training was really hard, and my body simply wasn't up to the task of doing the training and then also racing 26.2 miles. Because I actually got hurt after my first marathon, and I had this IT band injury for about 6 months. And I barely ran a step. And I spent most of the time on the couch feeling sorry for myself. I finally ended up seeing about 4 physical therapists, trying to get to the root cause of why I kept getting hurt. And I'd always had this long history with injuries. I've had, the IT band syndrome, but also the plantar fasciitis, the Achilles tendinopathy. I've had problems with my SI joint, plenty of muscle strains, everywhere. And I realized that if I wanted to run more marathons and to improve and to get better, then I really needed to restructure my training and to do things differently. And so that is kind of the genesis of strength running. I started it in 2010. I really thought that what I learned after my big injury and how I changed my training, I felt like I had something to share with the running community. And at the time, there weren't nearly as many running blogs and websites, and there were barely any podcasts at all at that point. And so I felt like I had this really unique perspective to share on running. And it was kind of born from my experience as a runner. And I was always just very interested in the training. Why are we doing this workout? Why are we doing this workout this week as opposed to maybe 1 week from now or 2 weeks ago? So I was definitely the guy asking my coach all kinds of annoying questions. I'm sure he loved me on the team, but it gave me a real appreciation for the exercise science that goes into designing, a full training program, and the training theory, and, all the rationales that you have when you're making these kinds of decisions. And so, when I started the strengthrunning.com website in 2010, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share a lot of the lessons I had learned over the years, and more specifically, what I had learned with this big injury. And, it's been great because since I've implemented kind of a new approach to my training, me personally, I've only had about one relatively minor injury since that major injury back in 2009. And I think even more fulfilling, I've helped so many other runners either beat their injuries or go really long periods of time without injuries when they were previously pretty injury at risk. So for me, it's very fulfilling, and I'm just glad I've been able to help so many runners.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I was chatting last week and previously just to you before we came on air with Greg Lehman about strength training. And it's interesting because we have to be kind of evidence-based, but it's so difficult to have quality evidence on runners in terms of injury prevention. Performance, the evidence is pretty strong. Strength training can improve running performance, especially in an older runner when we start losing that strength. And we know that the way that strength training can help increase the relative strength of running. But with injury prevention, it's really difficult. So the question whether we ever have some quality studies which can show that strength training does improve or reduce the risk of injury, we may never have it because it's just so difficult to get that population size and to get all the specifics there. So we have to really turn to evidence like, I mean, you've got a fantastic evidence base in terms of numbers and your website and 9 years now of looking after runners and giving them various forms of support. So it does seem population size, there's got to be a link, hasn't there, between getting stronger and having less injury.
I sure think so. And, I think when we think about running injuries, we're really talking about repetitive stress injuries. And these injuries are the type of injury you get because, you run, 15 kilometers a day and you're just going through the same motion over and over again. That's what a repetitive stress injury is. It's not like, you get your head knocked in American football or something like that. That's a different kind of injury. And so what strength training does is it really gives you more armor. It gives you more protection from the impact of running. And so I think it's very helpful for injury prevention. I think it's always helpful to think about coaching as part art, part science. You're never going to have all of the evidence behind you for every workout, every drill, every strength exercise. But I think that's the job of a coach, is to look at their personal experiences, their professional experiences, what they intuitively know about the sport, and then use the evidence and the science and the research to make the best possible decisions for their athletes. And so, while the evidence might be a little thin on strength training for injury prevention, my personal and professional experience is that it's incredibly helpful because, running injuries, are so prevalent among runners and that's because runners are really good at making training mistakes. We love running a little bit further than we're supposed to. We love going a little bit faster than we're supposed to. And we do all this before we're ready for it. And so if we can reduce some of those training mistakes, we're going to reduce our injury risk. And so at the same time, if you are strength training regularly and your muscles are stronger and all your connective tissues are stronger, you might be able to get away with one or two more mistakes. But that doesn't mean that you aren't going to make any other mistakes that will leave you injured. And so we have to just, look at the training mistakes that runners make and recognize that, we're really good at that. And I think that's just maybe goes to speak to the psychology of runners. A lot of us are type A. A lot of us think that, more mileage is good. If we want to race faster, we need to run faster, and we need to constantly be taking the next step with our workouts and doing longer long runs. That's a recipe for injury because, it's a recognition that the sport that we are participating in requires us to always do a little bit more and to go a little bit faster. And so strength training, I think, is almost like some insurance that allows us to push a little bit more. But because of us being runners and because we love pushing the envelope, we're probably still going to get hurt. But I think that strength training is a really great way to reduce that risk. But it doesn't completely get rid of that risk, of course not.
Brilliant, wise words. Well, I mean, yeah, you've inspired me. I'm thinking of just cutting this interview short and going to the gym now. But that's me. It's funny, isn't it? I think we talked about this before when you kindly invited me on your show. Listening to the American accent just sells it. I'm like, geez, that guy's so inspirational, Well,
it's funny you say that because the British accent is to at least to me as an American, I don't know what you're selling, but I'm going to buy it. It's weird, so intoxicating. It's wonderful.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, it doesn't work with all Americans. I'm not quite sold onto, for example, Trump. He doesn't manage to sell it to me. So it can't just be the accent. It must be something else as well. But
that's more like an ignorant New York accent. That's not an American accent.
We apologize if you're from New York and you found offense that comment. No, yeah. But anyway, what you're saying is, inspirational to me, but then I'm the converted. So let's have a look at potential objections, because clearly a lot of runners don't like doing strength training. You go into a gym and there's not a lot of runners there. Guess what? There's an awful lot of bodybuilders and people who want to get big and massed up. There's not a lot of people who look like they're going to go out and run fast 10K or something. So, well, let's talk about bulking up. A lot of runners are worried that kind of in their minds, they're going to gain muscle, they're going to gain weight. So they're not going to get as fast from A to B. What have you got to say about that?
Yeah, that's a common objection to strength training, and particularly among women. I don't want to get in the weight room. I don't want to bulk up. I don't want to carry around any extra weight. It's going to make me slower. And I don't know what else to say besides it will not happen. It absolutely is not going to happen. You can look at these biceps and tell that they're not slowing me down because they're not very big. And I think most importantly, I was talking to a couple powerlifters a few years ago, and I was telling them about this fear that runners have that if we get in the weight room, say 2 days a week, and we do a 60-minute strength workout, that they're going to put on all this muscle while they're doing all their running training on top of it. And these powerlifters were laughing, and they also got kind of sad. You know what they said? They said, Jason, this is what we do. We work so hard to both put on weight and to get stronger, and it's so difficult. This would be like one of your runners saying, hey, look, I really want to go for a half an hour run twice a week, but I don't want to become a sub 5-minute miler. It's just, I don't want to do that. And of course that made me laugh as a running coach because it's so hard to become a good runner. You have to put in so much work. It has to be strategic. And the same is true with hypertrophy or building muscle or becoming a really, really strong power lifter. You have to be very strategic with the lifting that you're doing. And you have to be eating a ton of extra calories to fuel that muscle growth. And if you're doing any kind of running, even if you're only running, say, 30 kilometers a week, then you're just burning through too much energy to really have your body focus on muscle growth. So number one, us runners, we are not going to be doing bodybuilding style workouts. We're not getting in the gym 5 days a week. We're not getting in there for 90 minutes or 2 hours. And we're not doing the kind of high volume work that results in muscle growth. And then the other side, we're probably not eating so much that we're going to be putting on a pound a week. And then, of course, all the running that we're doing is going to counteract the strength and muscle growth stimulus of all that weightlifting that we're doing. So it's just one of those things that I think a lot of runners are fearful of it. But if you actually ask the runners who are lifting, how much weight have you put on? Since you started lifting, a majority will say none at all. And maybe about 10 or 20% will say, I gained 1, 2, 3 pounds, but at the same time, I look a lot better. My body composition has improved. So yes, you might gain a pound or two, or maybe, a very small amount of weight, but it's going to improve generally how you look. And I think that is a very fair compromise. But for the majority of runners, you're never going to put on any weight. You're just running too much and you're not lifting to put on weight in the first place.
Yeah, definitely a clear message. And it makes so much sense when I hear you saying it. And I'm sure a lot of runners will hear it, hopefully from therapists and personal trainers and other coaches. But it's just that why, isn't it? It's an unnecessary why. And in terms of performance, the evidence shows that you will actually become a better runner. Every time you drive that foot into the ground, you're going to take off further and land further away. So every single stride, you're going to have a more stride length. So it's a no-brainer, really. But yeah, it's tricky. And like you said, particularly female runners. But then for most women, they've got it's even more unlikely they're going to gain huge amounts of muscle mass, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's harder for women to gain muscle mass than men. They don't have as much testosterone. They don't have as much human growth hormone, which make putting on mass easier. So it's even more of an uphill climb or an uphill run, no pun intended, for women. And it's just not something that runners should be worrying about. We should be worrying about making smarter training decisions and lifting so that we can become better runners. That, I think, is a much more useful place for our worries.
Definitely. Okay. So if we establish that, go down the gym, you're not going to become an Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. So you haven't got to worry about that. If anything, you're going to become a better runner. What type of exercises? Is it just general body exercise? Have you got any personal favorites that people should be doing for running?
Yeah. So when it comes to the gym, if you're actually getting in the gym, you're using a barbell, you're throwing some weight around, then I think the basics, the fundamental exercises work the best because we are runners. We are not lifting to gain muscle. So we're not going to do a lot of isolation exercises like bicep curls and things like that. We don't have to do that. We really need to train movements, not individual muscles. So exercises like the squat, the deadlift, the press, and all their variations, I think, are probably three of the most valuable exercises for runners. It's the three types of lifts: the hinge, and the push, and the pull. So these are really critical exercises for runners. And then, of course, within each category, there's all kinds of variations. So you can do a regular squat, you can do a sumo squat, you can do an overhead squat, a back squat, a front squat, and then using those types of exercises and sequencing them in a good way will allow runners to get a lot stronger, to gradually build complexity into their training. But we don't need to worry about, knowing 35 different exercises and having to do all of those every time we get in the gym. I think that's one of the big hangups a lot of runners have, is because, we don't necessarily like the gym. And I'll be the first one to say, I don't like going to the gym very much. I'd rather go run 10 miles than go in the gym for half an hour. It's just the way that I'm wired. But I also recognize how valuable strength training is for runners. And I think it's heartening to know that you don't have to be an expert in strength training to get in the gym and to do something that's going to be really helpful for your running. So, I've done a lot of those like DVD workouts where, in the course of a half an hour, you go through like 20 different exercises. You don't have to know that many. If you know a fundamental 3 to 5 exercises and a couple variations, you're going to be able to get very far.
Yeah, great advice. What about, it's interesting because I'm from a gym background, so I enjoy going to the gym. I really do enjoy it. But obviously, a lot of runners don't. Do you need the extra weight? I mean, there's an awful lot of body weight exercises out there sold on social media, and I'd question whether a lot of them are strength training exercises myself as opposed to mobility. But how far do you think you can get with just your body weight?
I do think you can get pretty far with just body weight, especially because a lot of body weight exercises have so many variations that you can continue to progress and to add difficulty and complexity with body weight exercises. A good example is the pistol squat or the one-legged squat. This is a really hard exercise to do. And, even people who go to the gym regularly, who would consider themselves pretty strong, might not be able to do a pistol squat. And I think that's just a good example of a body weight exercise at the high end of difficulty and complexity that you can gradually work yourself toward. So I think the body weight stuff is really good for general strength, for stability. And I think, for ultra marathoners who aren't running really fast, but who do need a lot of stability, they could probably get away with maybe only body weight exercises. But the shorter the race that you're training for, the more you need to really worry about speed and power and that kind of strength. And that really requires different types of strength training, because our goal then becomes not stability or general strength, but force production. We want to hit the ground really hard with our feet and really drive our feet into the ground. And like you said, Matt, we want to cover a little bit more ground with every stride that we take. That is how you get faster through strength training. And by lifting heavier weight in the gym, that's where we're actually training force production. We're training our muscles to produce a lot of force, to recruit a lot more muscle fibers, and that's going to turn us into much faster runners. Not only because, when we get tired at the end of a race, or even at the end of a long run or a workout, our muscle fibers get fatigued, obviously. And what happens is, if you are really strong, you're going to be able to recruit even more muscle fibers that you might not have been able to recruit if you were only doing, body weight exercises, for example. And so that's going to extend your endurance a little bit. But on the flip side of that, say you're at the end of the race and you have a quarter mile or 400 meters left in that race, and you really want to kick and finish strong, you're going to be able to tap into some more of those muscle fibers and really find a new gear. You're going to be able to finish really hard and sprint into the end of that race. And so it's not only going to be able to extend your endurance a little bit, but it's going to give you that extra power at the end of a race to really to kick hard and sprint. So I think the body weight exercises certainly have their place, and you'd probably be hard pressed to find any elite athlete, any elite runner that doesn't do any body weight exercises. And at the same time, you'd probably be hard pressed to find an elite runner who doesn't do any weighted exercises in the gym either, particularly a track athlete. So, these runners are going to be doing a little bit of both. They're going to be doing the body weight stuff for almost as a cool down after their runs, for added general strength and stability, but they're also going to get in the gym and they're going to squat and deadlift and press and do all kinds of exercises with weight, so that when they do get on the track and they need to run really fast, they can produce a lot of force. And that's what makes a really fast runner.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think people realize how much strength training kind of the elites actually do. Because when you put strength into YouTube, obviously you come up with the muscle girls and boys who are just packed already and huge. But there doesn't seem to be enough videos out there of elites, well-known elites, kind of doing strength training. I don't know why that is. Maybe there's no demand for it. They're too busy, maybe, I don't know, sponsoring shoes and stuff. But I often wish there was more videos out there. But they just don't seem to be there. I can tap in.
I will say, Matt, that I think Instagram has started to change this dynamic a little bit, where you're seeing a lot of elite runners. Matt Centrowitz, the gold medal winner in the 1500 of the last Olympics, in particular, comes to mind, where, it's almost like it's content that's good for Instagram. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a little bit more of it. Emma Coburn, who's a steeplechaser here in the US, is also, she shares a lot of strength training material on her Instagram account. And I think it's really great to see, because finally at the highest levels of the sport, both men and women, we are seeing these athletes in the gym hoisting a barbell and actually doing non-running activities. And I think it's very heartening for us runners to see that, because, at the end of the day, the running is what makes you into a runner, but all the other work, particularly the strength training, really helps it all come together.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to check out Instagram then. I must admit, whenever I put kind of strength training for runners or something like that into Instagram, my feed just get filled with kind of Eastern European women and Russians who, I'm not sure if they're runners. They've got incredible bodies. I'm not going to lie, but I don't know whether they're actually running or not. But so I have to kind of delete them. I keep them in there for about a week and then I delete them. But no, if you say so, then I'll be looking out for that. I often think it's something that's missing from runners. They need to see the kind of heroes doing this stuff. Okay, cool. Body parts. Okay, in terms of what to direct efforts, there's an awful lot. Again, if you look online where most runners kind of are affected from social media, the glutes, for example, get a massive kind of support of best exercise for your glute max, your glute med. Are glutes top of the exercises for runners, would you say, or is it something else?
Well, I kind of want to say yes, but I also want to say no, because yes, it is a very important muscle. It's arguably more important than your triceps, for example. But at the same time, we shouldn't really be isolating exercises or muscle groups. We don't need to only focus on the glutes. I know the hip musculature gets a lot of extra attention from runners. And I do think that the hips and the glutes are probably two of the more important muscle groups to focus on as a runner, both for injury prevention reasons, because these muscles, they're higher up the chain. They really control your entire stride, and also for performance. A lot of your power is coming from your glutes and hips. And so those basic fundamental exercises that we discussed earlier, things like the deadlift and the squat, are really going to prioritize those muscle groups, while at the same time focusing on every other muscle group too. These are really full body, compound, multi-joint movements that are really fantastic for runners. And so we don't necessarily have to isolate or focus exclusively on any muscle group like the glutes, but we should recognize that the glutes and the hips are probably two of the more important muscles for us to make sure that we're strengthening somewhere in our training program. So yeah, I don't like to isolate any muscles, but at the same time, they are very important.
Mm-hmm. I mean, being the devil's advocate that I am, I often, I don't know, maybe it's confirmation bias, but I think I see it sometimes, especially in distance running, because it's the old thing. If you look at a sprinter, for example, take it to the other extreme, who really aren't runners, they're sprinters in my vocabulary, massive glutes. Okay, they're kind of walking gluteus maximuses, aren't they? But then when you go to look at kind of like a distance runner, mid to definitely marathon runner, they're kind of all hamstrings, aren't they? And they've got like a tiny little tookus. So it's kind of like, I think the shape of the runner kind of, I can't believe I just said tookus on air. I don't even know why that came into my mind. Do you know what a tookus is?
A tookus? Yeah, isn't that your butt?
Yeah, I know. I don't know where the word came from. I must have seen it in some kind of, I don't know what it was. But anyway.
I said Fanny the other day, and I was like, I don't think I've ever said that word. I think I sound like my grandmother.
Yeah, you can't say that in the UK. That's a totally different part of the body in the UK. Okay. No one in the UK wears fanny packs. Just doesn't happen.
Okay.
But yeah, you look at runners, you can almost see from them where the muscles that are being used. So I think hamstrings, I often harp on about it, but I don't think hamstrings get enough attention. I think they get eclipsed a bit by the glutes, particularly in kind of mid to definitely long distance runners.
Yeah, I might agree with you there too. I think particularly the posterior chain. So all the muscles on the back of your body, the glutes and the hamstrings and the calves are really important for runners. And hamstrings too, I think are critical because they're one of the muscles that gets detrained by our modern lifestyle. So when we're sitting down for 9 hours a day, the hamstrings are one of those muscles that are really feel the brunt of that. You know, they're sitting in a shortened position for most of that time. And what we're doing is training them to be in a shortened position, just because of the position we're putting them in for a majority of the day. And so if we, work a desk job and then we come home and sit down to eat dinner, and then we sit down in front of the TV in the evening for an hour or two, that's a lot of sitting time that our body will remember. It remembers the positions we put ourselves in. And so, yeah, I think the posterior muscles, the glute, the hamstrings are all really important. And one of the reasons why I love deadlifts so much as an exercise for runners, because it does target the hamstrings so much.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. But like you say, it's making sure you don't forget any of the muscles, and also depending on the athlete as well. You might have someone who's naturally very strong and kind of like proximally in the glutes and have nothing in their calves, so they might have to concentrate on depending on who's in front of you. What I don't know if you've seen Lisa Shabbas. She's called you a legend, by the way. I don't know if that makes you feel a bit old. Can you see the comments on the screen?
I did see that. Thank you so much, Lisa, to distract me just a moment with my answer there, but I appreciate that.
Lisa's she's recently turned her attention to ultra running. How can I say, she's not, don't offend her, don't talk about women's age, but she's a great example of a female athlete who later in their life, like kind of past their 20s, has suddenly realized the power they've got for things like ultra running. She was blown away we had Elisabet Barnes of Marathon des Sables and various other races fame on the podcast as well. And we were talking about how kind of particularly women 30 plus have got this strength, probably mental more than anything, this endurance to be able to run 100k plus, and all over the world they're showing themselves. Particularly in the case of Elisabet, she will come third out of the whole pack. She'll be chasing the front two guys. So yeah, Lisa's a good example of a woman who definitely is one for her strength training. I saw your biceps, and I wouldn't want to. Yeah, don't ever hold your bicep up against Lisa. But yeah,
my wife's biceps are bigger than mine too. She's gotten into climbing in the last couple months, so she's doing a lot of bouldering, and yeah, she's much stronger than me now.
A lot of people are. This bouldering is becoming so popular, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, I think it is. For some reason, I mean, the pop-up of bouldering gyms, at least here in Denver, there's quite a few of them now. A new one just opened up near us, and I think it's great. I've gone just myself, just for fun, and it's really humbling because as a distance runner, you're reminded that your little T-Rex arms are just not up to the task. But I like being humbled every once in a while.
See, I've got the opposite thing. For me, I have to be careful because I'm 6'6". Okay, so I remember when I lived in Spain for a few years, and I could never go near a basketball court because I'd be the kind of guy on the side who'd be going, "We want him and his team. Come over here, you come and join us." And I'd be going in very poor Spanish, que no puedo. And they go, "No, you're so tall." And then they'd get me on their side, and I would make that film "White Men Can't Jump" just I just can't jump. It's ridiculous. And they're like, surely. But the same thing, I'm worried about bouldering. They'll think, oh, wow, he's 6'6", he'll be able to reach, everything will suddenly be within his grasp. So I've maybe got the opposite to you. I'm not so much a T-Rex. I'm more, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a dinosaur with long arms, maybe a brontosaurus kind of complex or something. But
man, I don't think a brontosaurus has any arms. They have 4 legs.
Oh, we're not going to get into that debate. What would they scratch their nose with?
Against a tree? That's a good question. We should not have a podcast about dinosaurs.
No.
I don't think we're going to teach the world much.
No. Only Adam Meekins can talk about dinosaurs, but that's a whole different catalogue of information. But anyway, yes. So, bouldering. That's another thing, cross-training, isn't it? You don't have to only get strong by going to the gym and doing weights. You can get definitely not 100% run specific, but does cross-training get recommended a lot on your website? And if so, what types of cross-training?
Yeah, I'm actually a bigger believer in cross-training than probably a lot of runners and other coaches, because I think it is one of those extremely low-risk kinds of activities that can have a potentially high reward. So in my mind, that's a big win. Anything that you can add to your training that has potential to really improve your performance and make you into a better athlete, but at the same time has very few injury risks, I think it's a great thing to add. So, I actually don't think strength training is really cross-training for runners. Cross-training is kind of something that you add onto your training for supplemental benefits. But, we were talking about elite runners earlier. No elite runner is not doing any kind of strength training. And so to me, that means it's not cross-training in the same way that it's just a different element of the training that you're supposed to be doing. You got to do a long run. You have to do some faster workouts. You're going to need a recovery run or 2 throughout the week. You have to do drills and a dynamic warm-up before you start running. You have to do your strength training too. None of this is cross-training. It's just the training we have to be doing. But so when I say cross-training, I really mean aerobic cross-training, things like pool running or cycling or the elliptical, things like that. Things that could, in a pinch, if you're injured or, if you can't get outside, you don't have a treadmill, things that could be used in place of running. Of course, they're not exactly the same, but they're aerobic forms of exercise that can give you general endurance benefits. So, I really like, if you're a runner who's capable of running, say, 60, 80 kilometers in a week, but you find that after that, your body really starts breaking down and you simply can't run a higher amount of volume without getting injured, you're the perfect candidate for adding in a lot of cross training. You can add in 2 or 3 hours on the bike or in the pool doing some pool running, and you're going to notice the results. You're going to become a better runner, a faster runner with more endurance just by doing all that extra work. My college coach used to kind of give a rough approximation of about 15 minutes of cross training would be like doing a mile of running outside on the road at an easy effort. So, of course, there's a lot of room for interpretation and what is equivalent and what's not. But his general rule here is that if you can do a lot of cross training, it's kind of like doing a lot of easy running. And so that kind of adds onto your base. And I've used this strategy very successfully with a lot of other runners. I've, kind of used it in my own base training before a cross-country season in college where, I realized our team was getting so competitive and I probably wasn't even going to make varsity the next year. And so in addition to running about 85 miles a week, I was doing about 4 hours of pool running and cycling per week on top of that. And I came into the season just an animal. I was in the best shape of my life, and it allowed me to actually make that varsity team that year by, the skin on my teeth there. I just made it. And I don't think I would have been able to do it if I hadn't spent all that time in the pool and in the bike. So it's really great, I think, for boosting general fitness. But if you just do a 30-minute really easy swim or pool run, that can be really helpful for recovery too. Doing that the day after a long run is probably better than just sitting on your butt on the couch all day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I come across a lot of runners who see their running improve a lot by getting a bike. They might not enjoy cycling much at all, but by suddenly starting cycling to work, for example, and they just see the knock-on effects to their running, come very, very quickly. So,
Yeah,
sound
cycling does
advice.
transfer pretty well to running. And that's the thing about cross training. Runners just don't like it. We don't like to cross train. Most of us don't like to get in the weight room and do any kind of strength training. And it's a shame because both of them are, I think, very helpful for improving our performances. If you're a runner who doesn't do any cross training, you don't do any weightlifting, dedicate yourself to doing an extra hour a week of cross training and getting in the gym. And in 6 months from now, I can almost guarantee that you're going to be a better runner.
Sound advice. You've heard it from the man himself, MrStrengthRunning.com. So yeah, do it. It's also useful, I think, speaking as a therapist, when people are suffering injury and maybe they have to run less or they're not getting that same. We keep runners running as much as possible. If we can, we might kind of just dilute the intensity or the frequency, but often you need to get that buzz from somewhere else. So it's not just saying go and do some cycling or go and do some swimming. And I think often it's good advice from a therapist to actually say go and do some intervals in the pool, or go and do kind of like a tempo workout, or challenge yourself in the same way as you would do if you were going out for runs. You get that thrill, that buzz, that sense of accomplishment, and that can often turn cross training into a bit more exciting, a bit more, okay, I'm actually getting something from this. Yeah,
and that does not only make it more exciting, and I think the perspective on giving runners an outlet for their competitive instincts when they're hurt and they can't go run that workout or do that long run, I think that is a very valuable thing to have. Be able to get in the pool or get on the bike and approximate the workout you were going to do on land on that form of cross training. I think that's really helpful mentally to keep runners from, almost getting depressed. I'm losing all my fitness. I worked so hard for this and now I'm just watching it disappear. That is really helpful. And you're right that I think if you are injured, but you can get on the bike and you can do some pool running, let's approximate the workouts that you had planned for the week and, do a similar type of workout on the bike or in the pool. And that's going to keep your fitness as high as it possibly can be. I had an experience with this myself, indoor track. My senior year, I was hurt for, I think, about 8 or 9 days. And I spent almost 2 hours in the pool every day doing workouts and the equivalent of long runs. And, I came back after that 8 weeks, and within a couple of weeks, I really didn't lose any fitness, and I ended up running a couple personal bests that season. And normally, in like a 6-week season, if you miss eight days, that's a big chunk of your season. And so I have pool running to thank for that. So it's definitely helpful.
That's great. That's very interesting. Yeah, and the mental part that you mentioned, I think sometimes runners keep themselves from recovering by kind of moping and feeling sorry for themselves. And I'm not having a go at runners, but I know how depressing it can be when you can't get out. But to a certain extent, even the evidence kind of shows that if you're just reducing your capacity to self-repair by getting depressed, by being negative, you're going to slow down your tissue recovery as well. You're going to slow down system recovery. So yeah, it's wise advice. Get the endorphins some other way, and that will speed up your running related injury. Great stuff. Okay, let's get a little bit more specific then in terms of strength training. What about, some runners might not be aware, some might be, but the different parts of strength training. So for example, for anyone who's not aware, if I'm doing a bicep curl, I've got the concentric part where my muscle's getting shorter. It's not the best example for a runner, but I'm not going to get my legs out on cam. But yeah, concentric part. You've got the eccentric part where you're slowly controlling the weight as it goes down. And then you've got an isometric part where you're holding a weight kind of still. So you could do that on a hamstring. What do you think? Do you not have to worry about it? Or in terms of strength training for runners, should you be concentrating on all of them or some more than the other? Or what would you say?
I think they all have their place in a good strength training program for runners. A lot of the body weight exercises might be more isometric in nature. Plank, for example, you're just holding a pose. You're under stress. Your muscles are under tension while you're not moving at all. And then there's exercises like the deadlift or the squat, which include both a concentric and an eccentric movement. And so, there's definitely a place for all of these. And I think, it really kind of runners just have to make sure that whatever kind of strength training that they're doing, they shouldn't totally disregard one type of movement and overly focus on another type of movement. So, if we're only doing isometric kinds of strength training, we're leaving a lot of speed and strength and power on the table. So they should all be included. But this is almost one of those things where I almost don't want runners to worry about this. I just want you to follow a program where it's taken care of for you. It's almost like with running form, you should not be thinking of the stretch shortening reflex, when you're in mile 4 of a 10K. It should just be out of your head. You should be focusing on performance. And so the same thing is true with strength training. We shouldn't be actively worrying about the minutia of training while we're going through it. Leave that to your coach or to your therapist, someone who can really, plan this out for you and make sure that you're hitting all the right systems and getting in all the right movements and types of muscle contractions. But I think they're all important, and they're all important for different reasons. I think anyone who's run a very hilly course with a lot of hard downhills knows how damaging those eccentric muscle contractions can be. All the soreness that you feel from those hilly races is because your muscles are lengthening while under load. That's that eccentric contraction. And so you can train yourself for those hilly races, especially if you're training for a net downhill race, by doing a little bit more eccentric work in the gym, but also by practicing some downhill running and some faster downhill running in very strategic ways. You don't want to just go run, 20 kilometers as hard as you can downhill. But that is really sport specific strength training in a way that is going to elicit adaptations in your body that prevent you from getting so fatigued and from getting all that soreness from a similar stimulus in the future. So there's a room for the sport specific strength training, particularly when it comes to some races like downhill races. But we should be including, I think, everything in our strength programming.
That's excellent. I think you've answered my next 3 questions just in that one sentence, which is an art. Yeah, I mean, it's great because, you've mentioned, for example, you can naturally work these 3 different types, particularly you can work the eccentrics by adding kind of uphill and downhill runs. And for the healthy runner, it's important that they don't overanalyze what they're doing at the time and think about it. That's why, they just got to follow their program. I think, again, for me, and it shows in me asking you these questions, the bias is more for when a runner is injured and they're being given exercises to do. So if you have had an injury, I mean, most running injuries occur in the eccentric phase. So when you haven't had, like you said, that control to lengthen the muscle, for example, in a hamstring, which means if you're doing your homework and you're being given a strength exercise, then you do generally have to accentuate that eccentric phase where the leg's straightening and not just kind of hook that heel up towards your bum and then let it fall. But obviously, when it comes to strength training, there's going to be a big difference, isn't there, between when a runner's actually injured and having rehab and to when they're well and are looking at improving their performance. Which makes me want to ask you about plyometrics. That gets quite a good kind of mention in terms of it's kind of the closest we can get to actually running. Do you kind of promote much plyometrics on the website?
So yes and no. I think plyometrics can be really helpful. I think they are an integral part of a good strength training program because they help tie things together in a more running specific way. With that said, they have a much higher risk of injury just because of what they are. They are a very explosive plyometric movement, these plyometrics. And what that is you are generating a lot of force very quickly. It is almost like a power movement. And so exercises like box jumps, either jumping up from a box or jumping down from a box with a little hop, all kinds of different forms of hops and jumps are plyometrics. And they're helpful for improving the power and responsiveness of your muscles and connective tissues. But because of that, they also have a high risk of injury. And so if you're not doing them properly, or if you're doing too many of them, I see this much more common in that, their runner's form might be pretty good on a plyometric movement, but, they're doing 20 reps or a very high volume of plyometrics. And that's where we run into problems because plyometrics have to be done with virtually perfect form or you're just asking for an injury. It's like trying to do an Olympic weightlifting movement with heavy weight with really poor form. Like you're almost going to get hurt right away. It's a really high risk.
A bit like CrossFit, you mean?
Yes, exactly. And maybe we can all make fun of CrossFit together. I have very strong feelings against CrossFit and all these AMRAP workouts where you're really just asking yourself to get a very serious injury. But yeah, the plyometrics are similar in that you have to keep the volume low. You cannot do, high numbers of plyometrics, and they should come when either you're relatively well rested, or you just can't be so fatigued that your form is going to suffer. The other thing about plyometrics too is that I don't think you should be doing them year round. I think plyometrics are something that should come almost in the competition phase of training or in the peaking phase of training, where you're trying to optimize speed in your performance. So if you are, 6 months out from a goal marathon, it's not the time to be doing plyometrics. You need to be building your base and kind of focusing on other things. So plyometrics need to be periodized appropriately and placed within the training program in the right way. You need to keep the volume pretty low, and you also need to make sure that you're not doing them improperly. So for those reasons, I don't actually promote them too much. If you search strength running, you're not going to find a single article, podcast episode, or video exclusively about plyometrics. You'll probably see them mentioned here and there in some articles. We include them in one of our strength programs, but that's because I worked with USA weightlifting national coach to create that programming, and I let him kind of worry about the real specifics of the programming and how to insert them into a strength workout program, because I understand how risky it is, and I understand that runners have to do it very strategically. So, this is where I'm kind of in the middle. It's so helpful and it's great, but you have to do it properly. And there's so many risks, and it's so easy to do them improperly that I almost don't recommend them too often.
Yeah, again, no, you've raised some fantastically valuable points in there. It's like there's no such thing as a bad exercise, but you can do the wrong exercise at the wrong time, which is kind of, in essence, what you've said. And that's the danger, isn't it? People think, I'm going to do some plyometrics now, and they'll end up doing it for either too often or at the wrong time of the season. Or, in fact, a lot of runners, as we know, haven't even got a season. They'll just kind of spontaneously do whatever they've read or they fancy doing. So, yeah, dosage. It's a very important thing, when to do the exercise, how much. I guess that's where the professionals need to come, isn't it? That's why they go to people like yourself and to strengthrunning.com. So that it's not just the case of I'm going to do some plyometrics. It's working out, okay, here's my races, here are my goals, here's my history, here's my injury history. How much of this do I do? When do I do it? Right. It's all programming, isn't it?
Yeah. I think about plyometrics the same way I think about a 22-mile long run with the last 12 miles at goal marathon pace. That's a great workout. It's also a very advanced workout, and only pretty advanced runners should be attempting it. There's so many runners that I know that were excellent college runners. They went to university and they were, New England champions in the 10K, top 10 in the steeplechase in New England, good runners, very competitive, who have never done plyometrics after they graduated from college because they didn't have a coach to show them. And we have to think about plyos as kind of like the 1% of activities that we can add on to our training to optimize our training, to get a little bit extra from ourselves on race day. But the bulk of our improvement, the bulk of our performance is going to be, through our running training and through more fundamental types of weightlifting activities. If you're not getting in the gym and, doing some normal weightlifting, and you're not doing faster workouts, and you're not having, in other words, a relatively more advanced structured running program, you probably are not the right person for plyometrics, because it's almost like the finishing touch. If you want to write on a cake, you need the cake first, and you need the icing as the foundation. You can't just have the writing.
That's good.
I made that up right there. Was that a good analogy there,
as you were saying it? I could see you thinking, this is going to really work, this metaphor. Yeah. So just say that again for those who weren't following. You can't have the writing on the cake until you build the cake first. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you can't write on just frosting. You have to have the foundation first.
Sound advice. Very good. No, I like that a lot. Okay, I've got a couple of other things. I'm conscious of the time. We could talk forever as always, but one thing I wanted to ask you about, because of your experience of working with so many athletes, what about when it comes to male and female athletes? So we've mentioned that potentially some women are going to find it, or that they're going to be less keen on the idea of doing strength training. You persuade them they need to. Is there different exercises or different areas they should be focusing on, or does it again depend on the athlete?
I really don't like to differentiate too much between male and female runners when it comes to strength training, because, our anatomy when it comes to running is the same. We have the same major muscle groups that are propelling us forward, and so we need to train those muscle groups pretty much the same. The difference, I think, is with some men who put on muscle very easily. And it's these men that maybe have to not lift as much heavy weight in the gym, or they just need to be a little bit more careful with putting on a lot of weight. I remember listening to a great interview with Alan Webb, who is the US record holder in the mile. And he is someone who he puts on muscle. He spends 20 minutes in the gym and he comes out 5 pounds heavier with all this muscle. It's like the opposite problem that I have. I'm a little jealous, admittedly, but that kind of an athlete should be a little bit careful, because you don't want to put on 15 pounds of weight. And there are some men who just easily put on muscle. And so I think that's like the subgroup that should be a little bit more careful with weightlifting. But in terms of different exercises for men or women, I really don't think so, unless there's some existing pathology or injury or history of injuries that is due to, something like, I know the hip structure in women is different than in men. And so they might be more predisposed to certain injuries. And unless there's a history there, I really don't like to differentiate, because I simply don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you on many levels. Again, I think it depends. Well, what you've said, it depends. Unless there's a pathology going on, unless they're running into complications. I mean, yes, women and men have obviously got variations, particularly in the lumbar-pelvic hip complex and stuff. But again, that's why women will tend to run in different ways. It doesn't mean you're going to get injured. We all run differently anyway. So,
yeah.
Once again, it depends on the athlete in front of you, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And you mentioned you were showing your bias as a therapist. I'm probably showing my bias as a coach. I don't think there's much difference. If the difference surfaces, it's probably some sort of pathology. Then I will refer the person to someone like you, who has the background to really dig into what's going on and prescribe a treatment to help them with their injury. But from a training perspective, rather than an injury treatment perspective, no, I don't think we should differentiate too strongly.
Do you work with many young athletes?
No, I try not to. I try to encourage young athletes to get involved in the sport at their school. So, if they're in high school or if they're at university, join the team, whether that's the varsity team or even if there's a club team. I think that's one of the best ways to get involved with the sport and to stay motivated and really develop a lifelong passion for running. And so I try to get runners to do that when they're younger.
There was only asked because there always seems to be debate over kind of what age you should encourage young runners to actually get involved with strength training. And in the past, they've said, oh, no, don't get them involved too early because it'll stop them from growing and it'll ruin their bone formation. And then that was kind of thrown out the window and said, get them involved when they are young, because that's exactly when they need to improve their particularly coordination and communication. But have you got any experience or?
I think I've seen the same studies or new thinking along these lines for this topic, that strength training isn't going to stunt your growth. I think that wasn't really based on much science to begin with back in the day. And now we're learning that, it's great. Kids getting stronger. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what's wrong with kids training is that they get burned out too easily. They really shouldn't be training. They should be having fun, unless you are starting to be in high school, a teenager, all your exercise should be mostly play, mostly fun. And so we run the risk of just wearing kids down with excessive training when they're, say 11 years old, so if they're having fun with weightlifting, just like if they're having fun with running, then I think it's fine for them to continue doing whatever they're doing. And then with that said, let's keep it pretty easy. I don't think an 11-year-old should be running a marathon, just like I don't think an 11-year-old should be, doing really hard weightlifting exercises and workouts in the gym. We should keep everything relatively easy.
Yeah, no, sound advice. Very good. No, I like that a lot. Well, look, it's 5:30 my end already. That was a quick hour. It always goes so fast these. But I thank you so much for giving us all that. I'm looking forward to making the show notes on these. I'm trying to make show notes so people get an idea of the topics and they can click straight to do. There's so much in there, so I'm looking forward to listing them. What's the current and the future for strengthrunning.com and for you? What's coming up?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Current for strength running, I am really still talking a lot about strength training. I think there's a big place for it in the running community, and I really do feel like the tide has started to turn a little bit, and now a lot of runners are starting to recognize that strength training is not only something that they should be doing, but something that is really going to help their running, and it's going to make them into a more holistic, complete, well-rounded, comprehensive type of athlete. And that's definitely going to make them into a better runner. And in the future, the things that I'm really focusing on with strength running right now are our podcast. So the Strength Running Podcast, we just hit 100 episodes. You were saying how episode 28 feels a little surreal. Wait till you get to 100, it feels even more surreal. We've hit 1 million downloads, which is kind of blows my mind. I'm really proud and excited for that. So focusing on the podcast definitely for 2019 and on into 2020. Also a lot more video. I'm excited to do more video. I think the visual is so powerful for runners, and it's just a new way to learn. So video and podcast is what I'm focusing on now and into the future. And for me personally, I've actually started training a little bit more than I have in the last couple of years. I have 3 kids, so it's a little bit hard for me to run the 80 plus miles a week like I used to, but starting to run a little bit more. I ran a trail race last month, and I may actually do an obstacle course race. So I need to make sure I'm doing my strength training in a couple months. So very exciting.
That's interesting. I mean, how is that for you? Because you're somebody who's used to coming first in quite a few events which they've gone into. For all I know, you're still coming first, but I mean, is it difficult not to push yourself too much, to have too high expectations, or?
It's definitely different and frustrating to, say, for example, race a 5K and race it at my previous marathon pace. But, I have to recognize that I just have different priorities now. My kids are 6, 4, and almost 2, and they take up an enormous amount of my time. But at the same time, I wouldn't have it any other way. My kids are great. And I honestly get more excited when my athletes email me about an awesome PR that they've had, or, some other great achievement that they've had in their running. I get just as excited about that, if not more excited than about my own running. And so, I look back at the PRs that I've run when I was 22, 24 years old. And now that I'm 35, I'm probably not going to touch those, but I can love running for different reasons. The 12-mile trail race that I did last month, I ended up getting second, but then I was DQ'd because I ended up skipping part of the course. But I have to recognize that, now that I'm older, I don't care. Like, it was a mistake. I made a silly mistake. I cut off, 0.6 of a mile on this little switchback, and I still had a great time out there. And so for me, I'm just much more interested in running fun races where I can experience pushing my body. And I think that's what every runner loves. I just want to push myself, have fun, run some cool races, and enjoy running for what it is.
That's very wise advice. It's the wisdom that comes with age. And I think it's interesting because I'm kind of getting that. I never ran as fast as you or near to you, but I love the way you say I'm running my kind of 5K now at my old marathon pace. It's like, that's a great analogy as well. Like, yeah. But then again, like you said, runs are totally different. I think we get much more fun out of runs now than in the past, maybe, where it was just all about focusing and thinking about the time and thinking about winning. And now I think maybe it comes with parenthood. You just kind of end up looking out a bit more, looking what's around you and enjoying it, which before was a bit of a mystery when I heard runners going, oh yeah, but I take everything in and it's relaxing. I'm thinking, really? But surely you just...
But your pace will suffer if you take everything in.
Exactly. Right? And what? Yeah, exactly. Pace goes out the window when you have kids. It's just about
It's
lasting.
true. And then I moved to Denver, where we're at 5280 altitude, and you see your pace go out the window from that too. So it's been very humbling the last couple of years, for sure.
Right. Well, look. Well, thank you so much for your time. We've got to try and get you over. Have you been to the UK before to talk at all or present?
I have never been to the UK. It's on my bucket list for sure.
Well, we'll try. If this year's conference is successful, then we'll try and I'll start saving up to get you over as well for next year. So just put October aside for me, and we'll sort something out. It'd be really
Sounds great, man.
Okay, dude. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you back down to the little lobby for a while, and I'll come back in a couple of minutes to say goodbye officially. So we're going to say goodbye to you now. Thank you very much, Jason Fitzgerald. If people want to contact you via the website, what are you most active on these days? Is it Twitter or Facebook or best of?
Yeah, I mean, strengthrunning.com is my home base. That's where kind of all of our podcast, video, blog posts are that's where they live. But if you want to get in touch with me, support@strengthrunning.com is my email address. I answer every email I get. And then I am Jason Fitz1 on both Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to connect with me there. Send me any questions you have. I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that those links go into the notes. Jason, thank you very much once again, and I'll speak to you in a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Right. Whoa, that was good, wasn't it? Hey, good hour. And thank you so much for people joining us. I think that's a record for reactions. So Jason's really stirred the pot with that one. I've never seen so many thumbs up and hearts. So thank you very much for joining us live. It's great when you can join us live because it's just they can see the comments and they can see the stuff coming up. So it kind of makes me feel better. So thanks for those of you who joined us live. Obviously, this will come out as a podcast, as always, on Spotify and on Stitcher and Pocket Casts and Podbean and Buzzsprout and all of those sites within the next few days. Right, what have we got next week? This is what I've got to remind myself because one thing I never do is check who's coming up next week. We got Dr. Richard Willey, again from the other side of the pond. Yeah, Rich Willey, esteemed running specialist. Researcher, he's going to be joining us on Sunday as well. Not sure the time. Keep an eye on Facebook and on Instagram, and we'll give the time for that. But that'll be next Sunday with Rich Willey, talking to him live. Thank you again to my guest Jason Fitzgerald. Thank you to the Brighton Beard Company for sponsoring us. Check out details for the conference, RCL International Running Conference, October 31st. Tickets are still available for it. As I always say, if you're a runner who hasn't got much money, if you've got a good story, then send it to me. I really want to give out discounts, okay, if I can, if I feel that you deserve it some way. Definitely. I mean, I had someone the other day. I'm a single mother working for the NHS, and tears were coming out my eyes. And I was like, okay, there you go. Have a 20% discount. I want to make it accessible to people. Obviously, I'm flying people in from Australia, from the States, from Canada, all over the place. So I've got to charge something. I only want to break even. But if you're in a particular situation and you need some help, then email me, matt@runchatlive.com, especially if there's a group of you. I want to help as many people as possible come over to Brighton in October. So there we go. Right. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next Sunday with Rich Willey. Adios. You're listening to Run Chat Live podcast, putting the evidence back into running injury and performance.